And it was interesting because as this narrative began to collapse, things started to change in the Senate very quickly. This wasn't a senator, but I talked to a congressman a friend of mine about a month ago, and he said, you know, Michael Bloomberg's group, and this is a guy from New York who pledged $1 billion to change firearms laws, spent $12 million in the week leading up to the vote in the Senate, and then went on television when it was over and said that they lost because the NRA bought votes. And I said, what? You know, I mean, there are a lot of people that confuse a lot of people a lot of things, but Michael Bloomberg cannot accuse anybody of anything because he is in the business of buying public policy by writing checks. It's what he does. It's what he does best. In this case, it's what he doesn't do very well. But I talked to a campaign reformer, a researcher, a liberal, last week in Washington. And he said he was doing a report on spending on Second Amendment issues. And he said, I'm a little bit shocked because I've gone back through several cycles. And he said, you people have never spent as much money as your opponents. And I said, that's right. Because our influence doesn't come because of money. It comes because of our members. And you can spend a lot of money trying to push something that nobody's interested in or nobody will buy, and it doesn't make much difference. And that's the problem that the administration and Michael Bloomberg fell into. So we were ultimately pleased with the way things turned out. And the interesting thing to me is before the vote in the Senate, the American Civil Liberties Union came down on our side because they were as concerned as we are about the establishment of a federal gun registry. They were as concerned as we are by the acts in some states. In Maryland, you know, the NRA position and the rational position on those, and the real problem, one of the real problems we face is that we've managed to dismantle our mental health care systems. And we've been urging for years that those people who have been adjudicated to be potentially dangerous be included in the background check system. That's not done in many states. But in Maryland, they decided to pass a law which says that a teacher, police officer, virtually anybody can call up and say, you're dangerous. And then they can use that as a reason to seize your guns and take away your Second Amendment rights. The ACLU said, that's not right. And they're beginning to recognize that the Bill of Rights, as I put it, is not a smorgasbord. This is not a delicatessen you can go to and order one right and say that you don't agree with the other. That any threat to one of the rights is a threat to the other. In the state of Washington, they withdrew it under pressure, but they actually were going to vote on a law in the state legislature that would have allowed the police to enter any house where it was suspected that the owner had a firearm to see if it was one that they were banning that with no warrant. And they said, well, wait a minute, isn't there another amendment that might affect? So rationality came in at the end. The Senate, members of both parties, got together and decided that we don't need to go down this road. There were some senators who suggested to me and others at the NRA, look, we've got a compromise. It's a peace treaty, and we'll end this war. My answer was, that's not a peace treaty, that's a one-week armistice in which we give up some of our rights so that they can come back next week and try to get the rest of them. There were those who were ready to applaud when it was turned off. I'm not going to go on. I'm often accused of going on, but usually that's in the evening. My wife says if I have a glass of wine with dinner, I get very long-winded and boring. My own view is that after a couple of glasses of wine, I get very exciting. This morning I haven't had a drink. What I'm going to do is stop and just thank you for the common sense, not the kind of common sense the President talks about, but the common sense of people in Iowa, both elected officials and citizens and those who are involved in protecting the Second Amendment. We don't have the kind of situation here that we have in states that are one-party states like New York and Maryland. And I happen to be a resident of Maryland. But we have states there where we've got governors who envision themselves as the next Barack Obama and who are doing what they accused a lot of Republicans of doing in the last cycle. And that is they're playing to an extreme activist minority in their own party in the hopes that they'll get primary votes. The bad news about that is that they're punishing the citizens of their state on the altar of their ambition. The good news is that they're destroying themselves nationally, so they're not really a threat to the rest of the country. But We've managed to stave off the current threat in Congress. As I said, we rejected a one-week armistice. This war has not ended. The enemy, if you will, has gone back behind a hill to regroup. They've announced that they're going to come back as soon as they think they can do it, and they will. We're going to be in court in these states that have passed the wrong thing. We're involved in recall elections in Colorado, and we're standing with those folks who stood with us, regardless of party, regardless of their positions on other issues, because the National Rifle Association has a very simple agenda. We're supporters of the Second Amendment. We're supporters of the Bill of Rights and Freedom. And those who stand with us always have our friendship. And some people, some politicians in the construction of this last fight in the so-called compromise decided that since voters have a relatively short memory and they weren't up for election this next time, they could go and cut some sort of a deal in the hope that it would help them on the other side when the next election comes up. My advice to them was to look at history, because it may be true that some Americans have a short attention span, but those of us who believe strongly in the Second Amendment have a somewhat longer view of the way things work and what happened than do some other Americans. So we're here. We thank you. We're continuing to represent those interests that we've always represented, and those are the gun owners of the United States, the Second Amendment of the Constitution, and the values we share. And I can't say any more than that I thank you for being here. I thank you for what you do, because the one thing about this country that makes it unique is not all of the things some people talk about. It's the fact that though this country was not founded for the politically obsessive, we could be franks. This country was founded by folks who believe that citizens should be able to live their own lives, make their own decisions, raise their own kids, work at their own jobs, and look to their own future. But the thing that's unique about it is that throughout our history, domestically and foreign, when those values and the right to live our lives has been threatened, Americans have always stepped up to the plate to defend what this country is all about. And that's happened now. We're proud of the fact that we're a part of that. We're proud of the fact that so many people have helped us. And our success, if that's what it was, is not our success, it's their success. And more proof of the value and the success of the American experiment. So thank you very much.